I never thought there would be a creature that eats plastic, but these do. And I wanted to see what would happen if instead of feeding them to pets like lizards, I let them live. All 50 of them. And that's when my plan was set and I was about to get some answers to my questions. Now these are called waxworms, and they were living in the fridge at the pet store, which I was nervous about because I thought taking them out and letting them live might kill them. But interestingly enough, just 30 minutes after taking them home, they got active, which meant I had to get them in their new home and give them a nice meal before some crazy changes were about to take place. So I put them in their new container, and since they eat honey and beeswax, I decided to try making them a honey and oat ball to see if they would eat that. I placed it inside, closed the container, and very soon noticed they seemed to like their new home because they were moving quick. They started to roam around like crazy. And I know I said these eat plastic and then proceeded to place them in a plastic container. But don't worry, they will not be able to eat their way out because this plastic is too thick. The plastic they eat is more like a plastic grocery bag, a thin plastic film, or very soft packaging. It's called PE plastic or polyethylene. It's even being studied by scientists to see if waxworms can break down plastic and help reduce waste. So that's why I wasn't worried about these little ones eating their way out of their new home. And it's interesting because the PE chemical structure is very similar to beeswax, their main source of food. So as worms, they can find their way into beehives and damage the colonies by tunneling through beeswax comb, destroying pollen stores, and leaving silk webbing that makes the comb unusable, forcing bees to abandon their hive. And since bees are one of the most important insects on the planet, don't worry because I will not be releasing these outdoors ever. They only live for about 1 to 2 weeks as adult moths anyway, so they'll stay contained and live out their short lifespans here with me, so we can all witness their awesome life cycle. And that brings me back to that honey and oat ball that I fed them. I noticed they didn't eat my home-cooked meal, and I wasn't sure if it was because they didn't like it or because they were getting ready to start the transformation. And this is also where I started to question their food source. Because how did beeswax become their main source of food if they aren't even supposed to end up outdoors? Well, I guess it all comes down to co-evolution and opportunity. Wax moths didn't one day decide to eat beeswax because they were supposed to stay indoors. They adapted to an ecological niche that just happens to exist, thanks to bees. Well, I decided that they didn't eat my honey and oat ball for a good reason. Because the very next day I brought them home, I started to notice the color of each worm beginning to change. Unfortunately, a few did not make it and turned really dark. But some were turning a golden brown color. And before I knew it, big changes were happening. I watched one by one as they began to shed their first layer of cream-colored skin and morph into a yellow creature. That's actually the pupa. And as they all wiggled away, it was crazy watching another version of themselves pop out from underneath and emerge as something other than what it was. It always seems to amaze me what these tiny creatures can do. But what was even more amazing than that was that over the next few hours, the pupas flipped back and forth until that yellow color started to change into a brownish color. And that got me excited because the pupa is the stage right before they hatch. But I learned it's not a creepy bug they turn into, it's a winged being, kind of like a little butterfly. And by the end of that first week, more and more of them started to transform, and I knew it was time to separate them from the others into their new place of hatching so I could become a mother. I was just really hoping at this point that they would all survive because I did notice some of them turning a little too dark, but I knew I just needed to give our 50 tiny babies time and let nature do its thing while I gave it a safe and contained place to happen. So on day 10, one by one, I removed each pupa, examined them a bit, and placed them into their new place of hatching. These tiny pupas were smaller than the tip of my pinky fingernail, the tiniest creature I ever worked with. It was cool because the pupas were even tinier than the actual worms themselves, so I knew I had to be careful moving them. Some were still a yellow color, some were brown, and at that point, I now had one container with some worms still roaming around, waiting to morph into a pupa, and then I had that second container where just the pupas were wiggling around. But really, in the back of my mind, the only thing I was questioning was at what point would they hatch from those pupas? Would they hatch at all? Would I wake up one morning to some moths in the enclosure? How big would they be? I had a lot of questions, so I tried to just trust the process, but it was definitely hard to be patient here. I kept watching as the worms continued to turn into pupas, but the pupas weren't really changing much. I waited about a week and a half, every day running to the enclosure to see if any of the winged beings were in there, but nothing. All I knew was that they were getting really dark now, and I knew that meant that either they were dying or they were all about to hatch. Here's where you might think, why aren't they hanging since they're in the stage right before hatching? Well, because they actually don't form a cocoon at all. They only form a pupa. Some insects, like silkworms, form a cocoon, and inside that cocoon lives the pupa. But for these waxworms, they do not create a silk webbing around their pupa, that cocoon, so they don't technically need to hang. Well, these little creatures getting really dark stopped worrying me after a while, because one morning on day 23, I woke up and noticed that one pupa was broken open, but there was no moth to be seen. So I started searching the enclosure for it. I was looking for it everywhere, until I noticed it under the paper towel at the bottom of the container. And I couldn't believe my eyes to see such a tiny creature with wings just waiting for me to move it into a well-ventilated area where it could fly and potentially mate. Well, our first moth was here, and I was now a mother to our firstborn child. I reviewed the time-lapse to see the first brown pupa broke open and out came a tiny baby moth. And you can imagine how excited I was to wake up to a baby moth in the enclosure. So it was finally time to see if they were friendly or not. I extended a finger and it crawled on me. It was pretty calm. It seemed happy to hang with me, and so I placed it into that well-ventilated new house. These things were so tiny, so I had to be really careful when taking them out of this enclosure not to lose them altogether. And then, one by one, before I knew it, they started to emerge as adult winged beings, and I couldn't believe how tiny they were. That was the craziest thing about this whole thing. Some were more friendly than others, that's for sure. This one, for example, moved quick. It was running away from me. So before I lost them altogether, I placed him in the new home. But this one was a lot more calm and seemed happier to chill with me. And before I knew it, I had 2 moths, and then 4, and then 5, and throughout that next week, they continued to hatch, and I continued to rehouse them while trying to spend some time with the ones that were more comfortable than the others, and I loved every second of it. They had such tiny bodies with amazing patterns on their wings, and I was just in awe of the whole process. The idea that a small container of 50 worms barely moving and sitting in the cold fridge could basically come back alive and go through so many amazing stages of life right before our very eyes. I started to realize that I finally got to understand what happens if you don't feed them to your lizards and instead you let them live. Now I was hoping they would mate and lay eggs and make babies, but I knew that would be hard since they only live for 1 to 2 weeks. And by that 3rd week, they actually did all die. I won't show you that here, but I guess the cycle was finally complete. And although I didn't want it to be over, I guess it made me realize why I do this and why I have this, some would say, odd passion for hatching tiny creatures and watching them transform into different stages of their lives. It's because it makes me think about growth and change, how every stage and every struggle and every beautiful moment of transformation can teach us about things like patience, resilience, beauty, growth. It's a reminder to me that every tiny creature has a place in this world, in our ecosystem. I know that growth, it takes time. Change can be messy, but most importantly, even the smallest beginning can turn into something remarkable. And it makes me think about the cycle of life and how we're all put on this earth for some sort of reason, to make a remarkable change. So, after 4 weeks of watching these tiny creatures that eat plastic transform, not only did we save them from the inevitable, but we witnessed transformation, and technically now we're all mothers to 50 tiny creatures. I'll try to get a chaperone for my next visit to the pet store.